I didn't set out to ruin a man's $80,000 truck. I just wanted him to stop driving across my lawn like it was his personal driveway. But some people don't hear words unless the ground literally gives way beneath them. My name's Ethan Cole. I'm 39, civil engineer, born and raised in Mesa, Arizona. The kind of guy who reads zoning codes for fun and actually enjoys solving drainage problems on weekends. Yeah, I know how that sounds. But when you spend your life building things right, you start taking it personally when someone else treats your space like it doesn't matter. I bought my house in the fall of 2022, corner lot, quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy, just a single-story ranch with a decent yard and enough sun to grow good grass if you take care of it, which I did. I put in about $1,300 worth of Bermuda sod, watered it like it was a newborn, checked the soil every morning before work. It wasn't just grass to me. It was the first place I owned that actually felt like mine. Now across the street lived a guy named Greg Barlow, mid-50s, always in pressed polos, always talking loud enough for the whole block to hear. He ran a used car dealership off the highway and apparently did pretty well for himself. You could tell by the truck alone. A lifted Ram 3500, matte black, oversized tires, the kind of vehicle that doesn't just arrive, it announces itself. And Greg had this way of moving through the world like rules were more of a suggestion, especially neighborhood rules. The first time it happened, I almost didn't notice. It was early, around 6:15. I was in the kitchen making coffee, still half asleep, when I heard this low rumble outside. Not unusual, but then it got closer, too close, and I looked out the window just in time to see this massive black truck cutting diagonally across my front lawn, not the street, not the driveway, my lawn, like it had always been a shortcut. I remember just standing there for a second, mug in hand, thinking, maybe that was a one-time thing. Maybe he missed a turn or something. Yeah, that thought didn't last long. Next morning, same time, same path, same truck. And the morning after that, and the one after that. Within a week, I had 2 clean tire tracks carved straight across the front of my yard, about 4 inches deep, maybe 8 feet long, like someone had taken a blade and sliced through everything I'd just built. I caught him one morning on his way back. I stepped outside, waved him down, tried to keep it friendly. You know, neighborly. Hey, man, quick thing, I said, walking up but keeping a little distance from that truck. You've been cutting across my lawn. I just put new sod in, so it's getting torn up pretty bad. He leaned out the window, sunglasses on even though the sun wasn't fully up yet, gave me this quick glance, like he was already bored. Yeah, it's just quicker to get through here, he said, like that explained everything. I let out a small laugh, thinking maybe he was joking. Right? I get that, but it's private property, so I'd appreciate it if you stuck to the road. There was a pause, just long enough to feel off. Then he shrugged. I've been driving that line for years, even before you moved in. I remember that part clearly, because something about it flipped a switch in my head, not anger yet, just this quiet realization. Oh, this isn't going to be simple. Well, I live here now, I said, still calm, and I'm asking you to stop. He looked at me for another second, then just nodded once, not agreement, not apology, just acknowledgement, and drove off. For 2 days, nothing happened. My lawn sat untouched, and I actually thought, okay, maybe that was it. Maybe he just needed someone to say something. Then day 3 hit. Same engine, same time, same diagonal cut right across the yard, like our conversation never even happened. That's when the frustration started to settle in, not explosive, just steady, like pressure building behind something. I tried again a few days later, this time catching him in the evening while he was washing his truck. Greg, we talked about this, I said, a little firmer now. You're still driving across my lawn. He didn't even look up at first, just kept spraying the tire. It's just grass, man, he said. That line, that was the one. Because to him, yeah, it was just grass. To me, it was boundaries, respect, the idea that where my property begins actually means something. I'm not asking again, I said, keeping my voice even. Stay off my yard. He finally looked at me then, slight smirk, like he'd just been challenged in a way he found amusing. Or what? And that, right there, that's the moment everything changed, not because I had an answer, but because I realized he didn't think I ever would. So I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice. I just nodded, turned around, and walked back inside. Because if there's one thing about being an engineer, You learn pretty quickly that problems don't get solved by yelling at them. They get solved by design. And at that point, I wasn't dealing with a neighbor anymore. I was dealing with a system that needed a different kind of solution. So after that last conversation, the or what moment, I stopped trying to win this with words. Not because I didn't have more to say, but because I could already tell. Greg wasn't the kind of guy who changed his behavior based on reason. He changed when something forced him to. And I wasn't there yet, not yet. At first, I went with the obvious stuff, small, visible boundaries, the kind that send a message without escalating things too far. Week 3, I picked up a set of wooden stakes from a hardware store. Nothing aggressive, just enough to mark the edge of the lawn along the path he kept cutting through. I spaced them out evenly, hammered them in deep, made sure they were clearly visible from the street. I remember stepping back when I was done, hands on my hips, thinking, all right, there's no way he ignores this. Next morning, 6:15. I'm already awake this time, standing by the window with my coffee, almost like I'm waiting for it. Engine comes in low, then louder, then crunch. Not a stop, not even a hesitation, just straight through, snapping wood like it was dry twigs. I watched the whole thing. The truck bounced slightly as it rolled over the stakes, and then disappeared down the road like nothing happened. I didn't even feel surprised, just noted it. Okay, that's where we are. That evening, I walked out, picked up the broken pieces, turned them over in my hands, and for the first time, I felt something shift from frustration into something colder, more calculated. Week 4, I tried something a little more structured. Plastic landscape edging, the kind you usually use to separate lawn from gravel or flower beds. I installed it right along the tire path, anchored it down with metal spikes, made it clean, visible, not a barrier, but definitely not something you just casually drive over. Or at least, that's what I thought. Next morning, same time, same engine. This time I didn't even go to the window right away. I just stood there and listened. There's a different sound when a vehicle goes over something it shouldn't, a kind of resistance, a moment where physics says no, and then something gives. That's what I heard. I stepped outside after he left, and there it was, the edging crushed flat into the dirt, spikes bent, sections torn loose, and dragged a few feet down the lawn. I just stood there for a while, looking at it. Not angry, not even really upset, just understanding. Because at that point, it wasn't about convenience anymore. It was about him deciding deliberately that my space didn't matter. That whatever I put in his way, he'd go through it, just to prove he could. That's when I wrote the note. Nothing dramatic, just clear, direct, respectful. Please stop driving across my lawn. This is private property. Continued trespassing will be documented. I folded it, walked across the street, and slid it under his windshield wiper. Didn't ring the doorbell, didn't knock. I was done with conversations. Next morning, I watched him walk out, coffee in one hand, keys in the other. He saw the note immediately, pulled it off, opened it, read it for maybe 2 seconds. Then he crumpled it, tossed it onto my lawn, got in his truck, and drove straight over the same path again. That was it. That was the moment something locked in for me. Because now it wasn't just disregard. It was intentional. And once something becomes intentional, you stop treating it like a misunderstanding and start treating it like a pattern. So I started documenting. Every morning, same time. I took photos, time-stamped, angle from the window, angle from the yard, tire tracks, damage, progression. I kept everything organized, dated, like a case file. 9 days turned into 2 weeks, 2 weeks into almost a month. 52 photos by the end of it. I also kept every receipt, every repair estimate, every broken stake, every damaged section of edging. I even sent certified letters, 4 of them, outlining the issue, requesting he stop, giving him a chance to respond. He signed for every single one, and ignored all of them. Somewhere in the middle of that, I called the HOA. Now, if you've ever dealt with a homeowners association, you already know how this goes. I explained everything, the damage, the repeated trespassing, the documentation. And the woman on the phone, polite, neutral, said, "This sounds like a dispute between neighbors. We recommend handling it directly." I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was exactly what I expected. Greg, the guy doing this, was the HOA treasurer. Of course it was a neighbor issue. So that door closed. And that's when I shifted gears completely. Because if no one else was going to enforce boundaries here, Then I needed to understand exactly where mine were, legally, structurally, and how far I could go without stepping outside them. That's where my job came in. See, as a civil engineer, I deal with land use, drainage systems, permits, all the invisible stuff that most people don't think about, but that defines what you can and can't do on your own property. So one night, I sat down with my laptop, pulled up city codes, zoning regulations, permit requirements, and I started digging. Not emotionally, not reactively, just methodically. What can I build? What can I change? What doesn't require approval? And that's when I found it. A clause buried in the municipal guidelines stating that homeowners could install certain types of underground drainage systems on their property without needing prior approval, as long as it stayed within property lines and didn't redirect water onto neighboring lots. I read it 3 times, just to be sure. Then I checked my property survey, exact boundaries, measurements, setbacks. And slowly, piece by piece, an idea started forming. Not out of anger, but out of alignment. Because if Greg believed he had the right to drive across my land, then I had the right to change that land in any legal way I saw fit. And once that clicked, everything became very simple. I didn't need to stop him. I just needed to let him keep doing exactly what he'd been doing, on ground that no longer supported it. So I made a few calls. Got in touch with a small excavation crew I'd worked with before, guys I trusted, explained that I needed a trench dug along a very specific line on my property. Nothing unusual, just prep work for a drainage improvement. They didn't ask questions, just gave me a timeline. We started 3 days later. Early morning, before Greg's usual drive-through machines came in, marked the line precisely where his tires always cut across. And then we dug. 3 feet deep, 6 feet across, clean edges, straight cut, right along that exact diagonal path he'd carved into my lawn over the past 2 months. Standing there watching it take shape, I remember feeling oddly calm, like everything had finally clicked into place. This wasn't revenge. It was engineering. Now here's the part people always assume was impulsive, like I just dug a hole and hoped for the best. It wasn't. Every inch of that trench was planned. After the excavation crew finished cutting the trench, clean, straight, exactly where Greg's tires had been hitting for weeks, we lined the bottom with landscape fabric, not for looks, but to stabilize the soil and keep everything from collapsing unevenly. Then we filled it halfway with loose gravel, not compacted. That part matters, because compacted gravel would have supported weight. I didn't want support. I wanted instability, controlled instability. On top of that, we stretched chicken wire across the span, secured it just enough to hold light pressure, like foot traffic, maybe a lawnmower, but not a 3-ton diesel truck. And then, the final layer. Fresh sod squares, cut clean, laid carefully, edges matched, watered down. From the surface, it looked exactly like the rest of the yard, green, even, untouched. If you didn't know what was underneath, you'd never question it. And that was the point. The whole thing sat entirely within my property line. I double-checked that, triple-checked it. Even had my survey markers flagged again, just to be sure. I also printed out the drainage clause, highlighted the section that applied, and kept a copy of my property survey right by the front door. Not because I expected a problem, but because I knew exactly who I was dealing with. The setup took 2 days. The waiting took 3. And those 3 days were quiet. No truck. No engine at 6:15. No fresh tire tracks. At first, I thought, maybe he noticed the work. Maybe he finally got the message. But something in me said, no, this isn't over. This is just a pause. And sure enough, day 4, 6:14 a.m. I'm already awake, standing in the kitchen again, same spot as the first time I saw him cut across my lawn. Coffee in hand, except this time, I'm not surprised. I'm listening. 6:15. There it is. That low diesel rumble. Turning onto the street, getting closer. Same rhythm, same speed. And then, it happens. There's no slow build, no warning. Just a violent, hollow crash. Not metal on metal, not a scrape. More like the ground itself just gave up. I step outside immediately, and the scene in front of me. I'll be honest, it's one of those images that just locks into your brain. The front end of Greg's truck had dropped straight into the trench. The sod collapsed inward, the chicken wire snapped, and the entire front axle was buried down to the frame. The front wheels weren't even touching ground anymore, just hanging there, slightly angled, useless. The undercarriage rested awkwardly on the loose gravel, and the rear wheels, they were still on solid ground, spinning, digging deeper, kicking dirt and grass backward in short bursts of panic. The engine was still running, loud now, strained, like it didn't understand what just happened. Then the door slammed open. Greg jumped out, face already red, eyes wide, looking at the hole, then at me, then back at the truck like reality hadn't caught up yet. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted, stepping toward me. I didn't move right away, just took a sip of coffee, set the mug down on the porch railing, and walked over at a normal pace. "I installed a drainage system," I said, calm steady. He looked at me like I'd just insulted him. "You dug a damn pit in your yard." "On my property," I replied. He pointed at the truck, voice rising. "You think this is funny? You're paying for this. I'm calling my lawyer." I nodded slightly, reached into the folder I'd brought with me, and pulled out the permit documentation, held it out just enough for him to see. "Everything here is within code, within property lines. Fully legal." He didn't even look at it. "This is a trap." That word hung there for a second, and I remember thinking, yeah, it kind of is, but not in the way you think. "It's a construction zone," I said. "You drove into it." That's when he lost it. He pulled out his phone, pacing now, already dialing. "Yeah, I need police out here," he snapped. "My neighbor dug a hazard and wrecked my vehicle." I didn't interrupt, didn't argue. I just went back inside, grabbed the rest of my documentation, the photo log, all 52 images, time-stamped, printed, and organized, the certified mail receipts, the repair estimates, everything. By the time I came back out, he was still pacing, still talking, still trying to control a situation that had already slipped past him. The police showed up about 15 minutes later. 2 officers. They took one look at the truck, nose down in the trench, rear wheels half buried now from all that spinning, and then they looked at me. "Can you explain what happened?" one of them asked. I handed over the permit first, then the property survey, walked them through the trench location, the drainage explanation, kept it simple, factual. Then I gave them the folder. "This is documentation of repeated trespassing over the last 9 weeks, I said. "Photos, dates, certified notices." They flipped through it, slowly, carefully. Meanwhile, Greg kept talking, louder than necessary, throwing words like negligence and liability around like they'd stick to something. But the more he talked, the quieter the officers got. Eventually, one of them closed the folder, looked at Greg, and said, very plainly, "Sir, you drove onto private property, into an active construction area." Greg blinked, like he didn't quite process it. He hit it. The officer shook his head slightly. "It's not required to mark every change on private residential property like this, especially when it's within permitted work. You were not authorized to be there." That was it. That was the shift. You could feel it. Greg's posture changed, just a little, like something inside him finally realized this wasn't going to go the way he expected. A tow truck showed up about half an hour later. Big one, heavy duty. It took them nearly 3 hours to get that truck out. Chains, lifts, slow pulls, every movement careful, because the more they forced it, the more damage it risked. I stayed inside for most of it, watched from the window, not out of spite, just distance. When they finally got it out, the front end looked rough, axle misaligned, suspension clearly shot, oil dripping from somewhere underneath. A few days later, I heard through one of the neighbors that the repair estimate came back just under $13,000. Insurance denied the claim. Reason? Driver negligence, entering an unmarked private excavation area without authorization. That part, I didn't celebrate, but I didn't feel bad either. Because none of this, not a single part of it, happened without warning. The photos of his truck stuck in my yard, those spread faster than I expected. Someone posted it online, tagged his dealership, and within a week, people were sharing it like some kind of local legend. "Don't be this guy" became a running joke. I heard he lost a couple of commercial contracts. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to sting. 3 weeks after that, the house across the street went up for sale. No announcement, no goodbye, just a sign on the lawn. And then he was gone. The new guy who moved in, different energy entirely. First time we met, he actually walked over, introduced himself, thanked me for setting a precedent. A month later, the HOA sent out a notice. New rule, no vehicle traffic across residential lawns. fine set at $750 per violation. Funny how fast policies change when the right person gets inconvenienced. By November, my grass had grown back in fully thick, even, like nothing had ever happened. If you walked past it, you'd never know what used to be there, or what it took to get it that way. And sometimes, I stand there in the early morning, coffee in hand, same as before. But now it's quiet. No engine, no tracks, just stillness. And I think about that question he asked me. Or what? Turns out, that question had an answer, just not the one he expected. So now I'm curious. Have you ever dealt with someone who kept pushing, ignoring every warning, every boundary, until something finally stopped them? And when it did it feel like justice? Or did it feel like you crossed a line too? Drop your story in the comments. I read more of them than you'd think. And trust me, there's always another side to these things.